Hello everyone, welcome back to Valley of the Mist Block of the Month. I'm Adriane Ritter.
And I'm Shelley McNeely.
And we're here with the December 2022 Block of the Month. Woohoo! End of the year! Is it beginning to feel like Christmas?
Maybe.
We're lying, we're recording this early. We're going to Hawaii this fall, we gotta get done. Okay, right. Back to business. All right. We have talked to you guys about this block, how much we liked it. It is a little crazy how we have to do this because I don't remember which one of us found this block. Maybe it was me.
I think, well, I don't know.
It might have been you.
Yeah,
I think we both found it in different,
yeah.
and it's probably a paper piece block, but we're not going to do it that way. We are going to use our math and ruler skills and creatively make this by just cutting.
Yes, cutting and sewing.
Yes. So we're going to kind of cut blocks apart and sew them together. Wait, that's what we do every month. Okay.
I know. It might sound complicated, but it's really not.
Yeah, and actually, it's going to be way clearer you watching this video because I'm already dreading writing up the instructions. Okay. So, Shelley, let's just start with fabric. And this is our last block of the year, so all right, you can tell them what they needed all year.
Okay, we need white and our focus fabric, which is the same thing we've been using all year. And at this one, we're going to need 2 to 4 fabrics that coordinate, this is what I'm using, with the focus fabric. So, whatever you're using here. So.
Yeah, and why it's 2 to 4 is that, I guess if you had weird pieces left, you could try to do it with more points, but you really need at least one that you can cut to get the right shape.
Yeah, otherwise you're going to be really confused.
Yeah, one of each kind. And because those points make these little, as I'm calling this, spiky star points.
Okay. So
what do we need exactly this month?
So with the white, we need 4 7 1/4 inch squares, and then we're going to cut those on the diagonal.
Just on one diagonal, so you end up with 2 triangles, 2 right triangles.
Okay, and then from the focus, you need 2 3-inch squares, and you cut those both on the diagonal also.
Same thing.
Okay, then from the 2 to 4 coordinatings, 2 of those need to be 2 inches by 10.5 inches.
And we're calling that point 1, okay? And I'll explain that later.
Okay, and then from two other ones you're picking needs to be 2 inches by 8.5 inches.
And we're calling those ones point 2. Now, I'll tell you that if they are not quite 2 inches wide, that's okay. They'll just be they'll get really narrow, and that's okay. You know, they look kind of more delicate that way because actually one of my yellow that I'm going to use today is not quite 2 inches wide, but I know it'll work. So I think it's like 1 3/4. It actually is a weird shape, but it doesn't matter. Okay, so let me talk about cutting these points. Okay. I'm going to talk about cutting point 2 first because it's the easiest. I just want, and when we're talking about cutting these points, because they're directional, you want them both facing the same way, okay? And if they're the exact same size, you can stack them and do them together. Because my 2 are not exactly the same, I'm going to have to cut them separately. But you want to cut them with right sides up. We're talking right sides up. You're going to cut from the left top to the right bottom, okay? Do it that direction on those. And then, now, I have one up here on the board behind me because I can't do this backwards. So I'm going to turn around. So this point 1 is a little more complicated. And the reason why it's more complicated because when we made stars earlier this year, we basically are just adding points onto a regular triangle.
True.
This one, we're actually having to add the point into the middle of the triangle. And then 0.1, when we add that on, it'll be like we did before, and it'll be normal. But the point, I mean, sorry, 0.2.
Right.
But 0.1, we have to get it in a little differently. And so to do that, you're going to take this strip, and you're going to have, and if your points, if these ones are all the same, you can stack them and do them together. You're going to take a ruler that has a 60-degree line, and we're not cutting a 60-degree line, we're using the 60-degree line, because when you do the 45 and you cut, you end up with a 45. But if you use a 60-degree line, you're going to end up with a 30-degree angle, and that's what we need. So this is my 60-degree line right here, and I'm going to lay it on the right side and line it up right on the edge, and then that tip at the top I cut off. And I want to cut off the same tip at the bottom. So if you can figure out how to do that without turning it, that's fine. But what I do, I just turn it around and I aim it the same way and make that same cut, and I cut that off. Now Shelley has one that's already cut. And so, oh, and it's further cut too.
Yes.
So we take this piece, once you've cut off and made that angle at the top, you take that entire piece and you lay, oh, I don't have a long ruler, I'll use my piece. Basically, you're going to go from the pointy points, the longer points, and you're going to lay a ruler on there, and you're going to cut diagonal between those points.
So you end up with these.
Yeah,
two.
leave them like that for a second. And so when we have that, they're going to want to remember which edge is what we're going to call the cut edge, and that's going to be this longer edge, the center that was between these two. Okay, so once we have all that done, now we have to add, our first step is probably the trickiest, and I gotta remember how to do this. Okay, so you're gonna take one of your, what we're doing is we are adding, we're adding a star point in the middle of this triangle. Yeah, I'm gonna use one of yours. I'll take one. So I have this, and yeah, that's right. Okay, and the reason I have you do this is because if you don't have this triangle aligned right or this triangle angle aligned right, you'll know, because you need to set it up right. They're both right sides up, and I can set this and it fits right in that corner. It matches. Okay, this is where we're going to be putting this point. If I had it up there right. If I tried to put it here, it wouldn't match. You'd know you have the wrong corner. If I tried to put it here, it doesn't match. You have the wrong corner. Okay, so you've made sure you have the right corner, and then I just ask you to turn it upside down. And now you keep them stacked the same way. Then, like we've done before, you're going to take this piece and you're going to pull it back half an inch on this edge, half an inch on this edge. And this is the confusing thing to write, so it's way easier for me to show you. So say this piece of fabric is a ruler. I can see through this fabric. Well, I don't even have to see through it. I can see on the edges of it. This is the edge of the little 0.1. And I want to cut off this part of the background triangle. So I put that like that. I've got the half inch. I didn't measure it. I just eyeballed it. You'd measure it. And then I'm going to pull this out so I don't accidentally cut it. Give it back to its lovely owner. And then say this was a ruler. Now I'm just going to cut that off. And now it's set. It's the right shape for us to add the 0.2. And if all of your points that you're making for a 0.1 are the same, then you can take 3 more of these triangles and use this cut one as a guide and just cut that off, because that's what you need gone. Okay, so now we have this piece. Oh, and we don't have one that's cut. But let me borrow your triangle again, Shelley.
Okay.
So we're going to be putting it on that corner. So we had like roughly, I don't know, like this much cut off. I really should have had a cut one because this is a weird thing to explain. And Shelley and I were trying to figure out how to say this. So say you have this piece. Oh, it doesn't really show up against that either. I'll lay this down so you can see the white edge under the green. Ignore the green's just background now. Okay, so we have this piece of triangle that little bit of edge has been cut off. And I don't know if you remember, but it doesn't go all the way to the bottom of this triangle. It goes, like this is the original edge of the triangle, and this is the cut edge. And this piece, which we measured on there, goes like this. And this is the edge we're sewing to. So we're sewing, so now that cut edge we talked about is going to face out when we sew it. We're sewing the other edge down because when I fold it over you can see how it matches. So I want to take this and I want like a 1/4 inch showing here, you know how we check that V, and then the top will measure up right. And we're going to sew along that edge. But the tricky part is, remember, you're sewing this edge down to the cut edge. This part wasn't cut of the background. So make sure you sew this 1/4 inch, and don't be tempted to bring this point down here along this and sew along that. You don't want that. You want it to only go, you want to align it to the part you cut and sew a 1/4 inch along that. And eventually you'll just come off of here, but it won't attach lower, you know, a tiny bit lower than the cut line just because of the seam allowance. Mm-hmm. But you're really going to come off kind of between these two points right here.
Right.
Okay? So because that part was complicated, we're going to do that, and then we will come back and do the next part. And trust me, the rest of it, this is the hardest part of it. So definitely, if that was confusing, watch it a few times.
Right. And
I'm going to try to have, I know there's notes in the video. They won't have pictures. So go to the website, and I'm going to try to have, at least you can zoom in on them and look at them better if you don't understand it.
so do this to all.
Yeah, so you have 8 triangles. You're doing it to 4 of them. So you have 4 of these 0.1s. You're going to sew them to 4 of the half squares. Right?
Triangles. Yes.
Yeah, to the triangles. Okay, the background ones.
The white ones. Yeah.
So we'll be back with those. All right. So, you know, just because it's the end of the year doesn't mean we got this right. Shelley did want me to mention 2 things. Number 1, we didn't mention how to press. And if you want to be safe, there are a fair number of points that come together. Right. And so you could press the seams open. I'm pressing to the dark because in the middle we aren't going to have that bad because we put a square in the center and it takes
right.
out a bunch of the points.
Right.
So you're okay just pressing to the dark. And then the other thing she wanted me to mention is that, you know, I talk about remembering what's the cut edge of 0.1, but she did want me to point out the cut edge is not the sewing edge. It is the edge you line up with, but it does become the outer. It does
right.
become this outer edge. This is the cut edge, and the sewing edge was the other part.
Right.
Okay? All right. Now we're good. Okay. So you should have 4 of these funny looking triangles now.
Right. Got 4.
And the next step is to make them look more like a regular triangle. And the way you do that is we need to get them back to being a triangle. And here I just did it, but can I remember how I did it? Oh my gosh, Shelley.
Okay, we got it.
Oh yeah, that's what I was doing. I was doing it right. So Well, I've got to turn it though. So I put that edge over here. Oh my gosh. I take and somehow, oh, I know, that's what it is. I at the top here, because this edge is good. If this edge lines up, the very top part, that's okay. It should have lined up if you move that down. And so you take your 45-degree angle of your ruler and stick that on the top edge, and then you line it up, and down here should be okay, because that's still your original part if you didn't sew it to it, like I said.
Right.
And you're just going to trim off the part. You want to keep as much of this color as you can, and so trim off until this excess part over here, and make it back into
the main thing is this edge has to be on the line, and then
this
down
edge
at the
and
bottom.
down here. These two are on here, so your ruler has to be big enough to catch this lower part too. This is a 10-inch square up ruler that I'm using. If you actually have a triangle ruler that's a 90-degree triangle ruler, it would work. It would be easier. But I'm trying to show you how to do it with the rulers, if you don't have any specialty rulers.
Tip originally was one of your extra square triangles you've cut.
Oh yeah, for the next step.
You can use that as
you could take one of your squares that you have left for the next part and use that as a guide too. Okay, so that's your way. All right, so now I have one here that I trimmed. So that's how it looks like when it's trimmed. Okay, so then we're actually going to go through 2 steps at this point. They're little steps. The first step is very easy. I want you to take a trimmed one of these and one of your leftover triangles, and you're going to lay them right sides together, and you're going to remake them into a square. Okay? If it's shaped weird, I oversized these squares, so you have some extra room. So don't obsess on that. I would just kind of try to line up the edges, make sure you got some in the seam, at least 1/8 of an inch in your seam. And just sew that down. Okay. So then once you do that, you are going to end up with a square that looks like this, which now has. Basically what we've done is inserted a point in the middle of this square. So it's a little wonky too, because we're inserting on a diagonal, and when you put them back together, they don't always line up. So you're going to take your trusty ruler and you're going to square this back to a square. And I do it like this. I go here, and this, I've made several of these blocks now, and they should come out, if you're not too far off, to roughly 7 inches square. Now, we don't need 7 inches at the end. We only need 6.5 to make our final ruler. So you've got some extra room. So if it's little, don't obsess. And you know what? Either side, you might have one that's like 7 1/4 and one that's 6.5. It's still going to work out because they're all going to go back together. So you just want to make it square, and mainly you want to make it square in this part here that's going to come together in the middle. The outer part we're going to trim at the very end. Okay, so you want to square that part up. So I have one of those. What do you know? I have one of those. I've already done that too. So there's that. There's a nice, beautiful star point. So our next step is to add the next star point, and that is with our 0.2s. And I have one here somewhere. So we kind of do it the same way. You're going to take, I have them right sides up, and this star point is really long. So this point, this edge here, should lay flat, and this is roughly what it's going to look like, a little bigger, because really there's going to be a 1/4 inch seam. And so to do that, we are going to take and we're going to pull this back, and we can do the same thing we did before, where you've got it lined up, it looks nice, it looks like what would be a nice little point. Turn it over, and you want to pull this corner down by the 1/2 inch again. You notice we added black fabric. It only took us 12 months, but you know. Okay, so now I'm a 1/2 inch off, and I'm gonna do the same thing where I lay my ruler along this, pull that point out, and cut that part off. And then you're gonna attach that point the same way. So when we come back, I want you to have 4 blocks with 2 points on each block. Can we do that? Okay.
We'll try.
All right. All right, so you should have 4 of these blocks with 2 points, like we said.
Yes.
And, all right, what did I forget to mention?
This one we sew on the cut side.
Okay, so yeah, so this one, remember, it was that long rectangle when we cut it on the diagonal. That is your sewing side on this one. You just got to keep it.
We need a square when we're done. That's the tricky part there.
We did have some discussion about how to press.
Yeah.
Shelley thought there's a lump. So did you press open or press to the light?
I pressed to the light.
Okay.
I did.
I pressed to the dark again. So
You pressed to the lump.
I pressed to the lump.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so after you're done, then you need to go back and bring it back to a square again, just on these 2 edges.
Or maybe even a rectangle, right? It doesn't have to be square.
Well, no, we want it. I mean, you're not really cutting the other edges, but remember, we don't want to lose our points.
Right.
So you don't want to.
I haven't looked at those edges.
I know. So you don't want it too big. But
They better be good.
But these are very delicate points. So a lot of that length of that point is going to go into your seam allowance when we sew the final block together. So we're good.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll have to check some of mine because mine might be close. If mine's too
No,
long.
it's hard. I think you're okay because
Okay.
even up to here, see, this is going to go all in the seam allowance.
Oh, that's true. You're right.
All right. So our next step, after you've got 4 of those, and up till now, I really haven't suggested you think about color placement because it hasn't mattered.
Mm-hmm.
We're just, if you had different points, I only had 2 colors and you only had 2 colors.
I have 3 colors.
You have 3 colors. Okay. So, but your long points were all the same color.
My long points were all the same.
Okay. Her point number 1 were all the same color.
Right.
And so the other ones just it went against one of those.
Yeah.
So now you will have to think when you're putting it together how you want it to look. So maybe lay it out, but not even at this point because we need to add a little flippy corner to this center. Now it's a normal flippy corner, but it does kind of throw you off because we've cut them as a triangle because we like to conserve our focus fabric. If you're not worried about conserving the focus fabric, you can do it how they do a normal flippy corner where you cut a square, you lay a square here, cut a little bit to the inside of the diagonal and press it out and then trim off the extra. That's a normal flippy corner. Feel free to do that. Did we do that? No.
No, we never do that.
We don't make it easy. So you're going to do the same thing where you take this triangle that we've cut, pull it back to the 1/2 inch. And you know what, I because of these, I still haven't got this whole technique totally right, or maybe I'm just kind of loosey-goosey how I place it. But I always have some left to trim off. And you would think, like I sewed on this one, and it's hard to tell against the black. I'll throw it up here. I still stick out, but I swear I was a 1/2 inch. Maybe I'm just...
But it doesn't matter, right?
No, it doesn't matter. Whatever method you use the same method in all 4 because you kind of want them to kind of align with each other. Don't do one way and then think, oh, let me try this other way, because then they might not match.
But even mine other
well,
one.
they don't have to match perfectly.
It doesn't match.
But you do kind of want them to match. And you want this to cover the points, the edges of the points. That's the idea.
Mm-hmm.
If you had less focus fabric left, like you were at the very end of your focus fabric, you could use a smaller square.
Right. Yeah.
But you still want it to cover the ends of the points.
Right.
Okay. Okay, so you're going to do 4 of those, and that I pressed to the dark because that's what we're adding on. And so that's kind of neat. It's fine. Okay, so so you're gonna do 4 of those, and then you're gonna pop these babies together.
Pop them together.
Pop them together, and look at them, and sew those 2 last seams. We're gonna do all this.
Oh,
I mean,
okay.
this has been a year of sewing. I think you guys have learned some stuff.
This is just a 4-patch after you've done
It's
that.
just a 4-patch. We're gonna put together this 4-patch, and we're gonna come back with a finished block. Whether it kills us or not.
It
All right. We haven't mentioned that Shelley's had a couple of boo-boos along the way. Maybe only one.
Only one.
Yeah.
I didn't cut my 30 degree. It ended up being a 45.
Yeah.
I thought it was a 30.
Yeah. And then we had a whole big like, why isn't this measuring right? And yeah, once you cut the angle wrong on that first cut, I do want to remind you, you can't check the angle unless you put the pieces back together, because that angle changes. So if you cut it wrong, you've got to put those 2 triangles back together and then check whether the angle is right.
Yeah.
But she's like, mine is not fitting. And I go, okay. All right, so anyway, let's come back with our finished blocks. And wow, I feel like we should open champagne for the end of the year or something, but we won't.
We won't.
All right, so we're back with our finished block, and it looks spectacular.
Yeah, I love
Shelley
it.
was really worried. She's like, mine's going to be too big, and I'm going to lose my points. I go, no, don't. Don't. Trust me.
Yep.
Do trust me. And I will say one thing. On the pressing for the focus fabric, Shelley and I both opted to alternate. So one pressed in, one pressed out.
Right.
Trying to get them to nest. You may or may not have
They
success
kind of
with.
nest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But mine's trimmed, and mine, before I trimmed it, was about 13.5 inches. But like I said, these are very fine points, so they pull in and you're fine.
Yeah.
Shelley still has to trim hers. Yours is what, at about 13?
No,
what
it's
you said?
between 13 and 13 and a half, or 13 and a quarter, something like that.
So
Yeah.
yeah. So it's still going to trim up fine. All right. Well,
know.
this has been a great year trying to do these
Trying to do
stars.
stars.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And who'd have thought we could find so many different kind of stars?
I
I would
know.
say we both kind of agree. We loved January. We loved doing that.
Oh, yeah.
That with the 5-pointed star. That was pretty cool.
Oh, it was, yeah.
And I liked May, which had the little tiny stars. And I don't know if you remember, but originally it's this one right over here.
Yes.
That I did a version where it connected with the next block, and you had even more stars. But that was a lot of pieces.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, so we'll see you back next year for Valley of the Mist Block of the Month.